created a lot of little cards of people that we could distribute throughout the space.
They're kind of like game models. They're pretty low resolution. You can see when you get close to them, they get kind of chunky. And then when you pull back, they start to hold up a little bit more like real humans. When we rig them with simple skeletons so that any animation that we create on one character can be applied to another character.
We started with the original effect from the first film, and there's these sort of veins that grow over his body, and the veins sort of make his body melt away and go into the phone. But on this one, they wanted the veins to actually crack open and reveal sort of the data structure on the inside of their body. So we came up with this idea of the grid and the data blips on the inside from just drawing all sorts of different variations of what that grid may look like.
We're using this firm, BUF, B-U-F, from Paris. I gave them the assignment of code. Larry and Andy wanted to make a point that the code was like the fabric of life in the Matrix and that you could keep exponentially going into the detail. How many people get asked to visualize an orgasm in code? That laid the groundwork for fascinating design discussions with men and women alike in the workplace about how to actually graphically depict the sensations, the sort of cyclical builds of vibrational energy. The way that BUF likes to work, they like getting photographic source material from which they dimensionalize and turn to graphics. So on that particular shoot, we had a motion control system that was doing repeat passes delicately, programmably through her legs. Luckily, the actress had a really great sense of humor.
Go back a little bit.
And we had to do many different takes because BUF needed lighting effects happening upon the inner thighs of the actress. We did many of those passes and, in fact, had the costume department, Kim Barrett, make special aluminum underwear for the actress so that we could get a really sonic light at the end of the tunnel. The city itself is another machination of Jeff Darrow and Larry and Andy's imagination.
My name's Craig Hayes. I was visual effects supervisor for Tippett Studio. For the work that we did on Matrix 3 Revolutions, which was primarily for the Machine City work, which was exciting for us because it's a big chunk of work, you know.
Question is, like, let's say if we have, ridges and different elevation changes.
Yeah.
And then we cluster.
They're able to access really complex digital effects of all sorts. They understand character and character animation better than almost anybody in the industry.
Here is the chasm where the Logos is going to come out of.
Right.
The power towers in the background. So these are all the fetus fields.
It's always been kind of referred to as like a coral reef or some kind of a foreign kind of a landscape that's just teeming with life. We haven't had a tidal kind of movement. Like within the city itself, the buildings would be swaying and moving. Nothing was really static within the city. There was always flocks of characters teeming about.
I tried to come up with an aesthetic that wasn't an aesthetic that we would recognize but was an aesthetic. I don't know if I succeeded, but that was the whole idea.
Some of the shots we started with were the fetus field reveal shots, the power towers and just coming up over the edge. And just because of the sheer magnitude, just there's tens of thousands of these fetus stocks. So getting some of those renders through was really a bear.
It was a collaboration, without a doubt. We really felt like, yeah, these guys understand this world and we are in good hands the whole way.
What I did like about this, the latter part, was this stuff we start to see on the horizon. So I think that stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where we're going.
We started up here about 2.5 years ago and we had 6 people and 3 laptops. And now we've got, about 300 people, 300 graphics workstations.
Check it out.
Got a render farm of over 2,000 processors, 80 terabytes of online storage for shots, and about 5 terabytes of RAM in the facilities.
I think we're one of the biggest facilities in terms of raw firepower there is in the world right now. We've built tons and tons of proprietary software.
It's been a really long haul, and we've only just got there now, just in time for the end of the movies. And now with Siege, more than doubled our capacity in terms of render and disk storage.
So it goes 3s, then 5s, and then 7. To really do Jeff's work to the detail that he creates is an extreme undertaking.
Everything is massive, epic, and 250,000 sentinels and millions of machine creatures.
The rules that we have to play with in this sequence are all real-world physics. The challenge of it is that we have no real reference because these machines don't exist.
There was one thing that whenever we came in and we did, and that was the idea that there would be sort of different types of sentinels, almost like in an ant nest.
Each sentinel has 15 tentacles and 10 underarms and 10 arms or claws, and then 32 sewing needles and 6 animatable eyes. Until you start doing all of its 15-legged performance, you don't really know how much screen space the character takes up.
Because of the way they move, because of the squid-like nature and the flowing nature of the tentacles and the fact that they fly, people thought that they were underwater. And so we're trying to make this creature fly and look fluid and at the same time make it clear that no, he's not underwater. You can get all kinds of performances out of them.
We established about 15,000 sentinels at any one time. Well, that's a pretty phenomenal number of creatures to sort of keep track of, animate, render, light, make look like every one of them is doing the right thing.
It's just a memory hog in terms of rendering.
All the different elements that will be in a shot, the dock, the characters, the platforms, the subfloor, all that sort of stuff, all have to be, brought into the same world and make it look real.
The bar continuously gets raised. Every huge film that comes out that involves a lot of complex effects. With that comes, certain things, technical, aesthetic, that you're always challenged to achieve and to surpass.
It actually looks like Morpheus, doesn't it? It's kind of cool.
The new bullet time.
In terms of technology, this is the most important stuff.
I'm very proud of the virtual environments that we created. The cities for Trinity Saves and Trinity Falls look stunning.
Specific buildings in Sydney have been selected to be the environment.
It doesn't involve us completely making synthetic creations in the computer. We still need a real set, real lighting, and real photography to get it to work.
It's a whole procedure to shoot still photographs of subjects like buildings and other things, and then project the textures that you get from the stills back onto 3D forms in a computer 3D animation environment.
We then place pre-visualization versions of Keanu, Hugo, or Carrie-Anne, allow animators to rough out blocking to really get a better feeling for the sequences moving. The next thing that we need to do is actually start thinking about doing the shots for real.
That is a project unto itself, the human being, the perfect Neo, the perfect Agent Smith, expressions changing, fabric, hair, the whole thing.
Motion capture is a way of allowing a real actor to perform and getting that performance onto a digital body inside the computer. Because our characters are superhuman. You can't do everything as motion capture, but if we take the awesome work that can be done in the motion capture rig, we can extend it with hand animation.
His legs run back and forth instead of back, recover, boom.
Yeah.
Okay, neutral.
We as humans really can read another person's face easily.
We felt that we could not produce realistic-looking human faces by purely having an animator physically animates each of the characters in the scene.
We decided to build this system, which we call Universal Capture System, which consists of high-definition cameras and arranged around the actor's face.
The UCAP process is a proprietary process that we developed here to capture an actor's facial expressions and bring that into a digital realm.
So the trick here is to not have anyone know that they're virtual humans. That is the highest bar to jump over. The scene really has a blend of all different types of techniques. There's virtual backgrounds, virtual city. There's glistening CG glass, bullet wakes and all of that stuff.
In the first film, they sort of came out as discs and they just kind of hung out as discs. In this shot and in all these shots where wakes occur, there's a kind of pulsing system where it's kind of like a wave that kind of like the discs pulse in and out.
Biggest sequence that I've had involvement with is the Burly Brawl. It's really one of the first times we have like full frame CG humans and lots of them. The other thing we wanted to do is come up with camera moves that we've we've never really seen in movies.
Our goal was to sample what they've done and recreate it as close as possible to the real thing, but just give them the ability to move the camera like crazy.
You can basically sit there and think up any shot within your own mind and recreate it in CG, which is the beauty of it. You're not limited by a camera rig, a crew. It can all happen within a computer.
That was one of our defining anime-esque action beats.
A lot of the things that he tries to do in his everyday performance, I just tried to incorporate that into his movements. He's not too worried about this fire, though, because he is Neo. You know, he could probably turn around and control it if he wanted to. Then I assigned this UCAP performance. I've got it going so it kind of matches his movements and punches, and his teeth start gritting as he's going down the hall.
This shot started out with the first Matrix movie had the elevator lobby. Combination of fire, but with a very liquid feel, but also with sort of a semi-intelligent behavior.
With this feeling of this fire crashing down and turning corners, how the flames would hit and then open up into the claw that kind of reaches forward and just wraps around Neo.
Great examples of what you can do with virtual cinema technology, because it's a subconscious event, it's a fantasy event, but it has that hyper-realism.
To have someone say, how did they shoot that, would be like, it's a pretty good compliment, I think.
And so we were learning all the time. It's like people have never done these shots before. Technology is at a place right now, and rendering is at a place, and all the advances that we've had in computers that allow us to do these kind of shots.
Look at this guy here. He does this all day. Isn't that brilliant?
My crew and I, really one of our edicts to ourselves is to never repeat ourselves. We make it part of our operating principle that we don't just use the same material. But especially something like Reloaded and Revolutions, we wanted everything to sound new to us and to the audience. Recording sound effects is part of the sound post-process that nobody wants to think about. You know, nobody certainly wants to pay for it. So we have to find very, very cost-effective ways of doing these really crazy things. In a lot of ways, they're commensurate in difficulty with what they're having to shoot visually, you know? Microphones really are our instruments, but we do endanger them a lot. We don't have the equivalent of a long lens at all. You know, microphones are best up close.
I bet that overloaded.
When you experience a loud sound, especially a very transient sound like a gunshot in real life, emotionally what you're experiencing is that overload.
So that's what happens if you don't wait.
Yeah.
Gotta wear and protect your hearing.
What we try to do in movies is to recreate or emulate that feeling of having your hearing system overload. And we do that through limiting the compression techniques and distortion and overload techniques as well. The other factor also that's important is small caliber weapons really don't make that much of a sound. But it still has to be dramatic. So even as we're recording 22s, we're incorporating a little bit of something else in it. It's the same with fight sounds, obviously. The original library that we constructed had an arc to it. You know, the sounds in the original Matrix fight starts with a very natural kind of sound in the first training session in the dojo and ends up this insanely brutal sound when Smith and Neo are fighting in the subway tunnels. In order to create a new vocabulary of hits, instead of using my own body, as I so often do for fight sounds, we hired some professional fighters. We got these two jiu-jitsu pros and just got them into our studio and a couple of other studios and just had them beat the crap out of each other for what ended up being 4 days, you know, and throwing each other onto cement and having them run and slam their backs into each other and, you know, just to create a whole new library of violent, you know, body sound. But on top of the impact sounds, a very key part of the way the fight sound in the Matrix is the whooshes. We constructed an enormous collection of devices for making air whoosh, from you know, stacks of CDs with little spacers in between them, you know, being spun around, to all kinds of this weird metal technical grill. We would just swing them all around as hard as we could around microphones. You know, one of the most daunting challenges of the Matrix movies, and any movie that's highly visual effect heavy, is that we basically can't see the movie that we're working on, because the visual effects people are evolving the look of the movie simultaneous with us evolving the sound of the movie. From talking with Zach and Larry and Andy and John and people about what that really is going to comprise when it gets all rendered out, we can start to guess about the sound of it. In many cases, we don't see the movie until the audience does. I mean, if we see it finished before we ship the final soundtrack, the final print master of the movie, we're lucky. Well, the thing I like most about our work on the Matrix movies is just how significant the movies themselves have become. You know, that's very, very exciting and gratifying in a lot of ways. You know, and all of us in sound and in visuals, and Larry and Andy, and you know, everybody, and in music. I think we all feel like we work together to make something very rich, you know, and very whole.
It's pretty crazy because we've been in Australia, this is about a full year for me now. And I'm excited to be going home, but it feels very displaced, you know, like it's hard to believe this is all over here. But I'm very glad it's over in the sense that now we can really begin what I love to do, which is I have all the film in front of me, more or less, except for a lot of visual effects shots that are still going to be coming in, and getting it to be a whole movie.
Right.
You know, we've been
concentrate on.
Yeah, that's all I've got to focus on now. Dailies are over. I'll have Larry and Andy's attention 100%, and it's going to be great. From the very beginning of these movies, before we ever shot The Matrix, Larry and Andy had designed a trilogy, not knowing if they would ever get beyond the first movie, because they understand the economics of making movies, and they know that in order to complete a trilogy, the first movie has to be successful. So we never knew for sure that we were going to make Reloaded and Revolutions, but that was always the intent. I always tried very hard to see it as a 4-hour movie, because it's clear when you leave Reloaded and when you start Revolutions, you're in the same physical place. The movies were shot concurrently, so I had sort of a rough assembly of most of both movies within a month after we finished shooting. Luckily, we had extensive previs of the visual effects sections that were not shot. And so by using those in the cut, that served me very well. You wanted to see the rest of the editing room, right?
Behind the magic.
All right. So out here, Catherine, did you say hi?
Hello.
It's Catherine Chase. And hi. Catherine's going to be on the movie the entire time. As Catherine's a first assistant, Dave is also a first assistant. His area is mostly working with the Avid. Catherine mostly works with the film. Now here we get 2 with 1 blow. Standing with Catherine right now are Allison and Jenny. Jenny's the second assistant editor. Allison's our apprentice. Allison was with me on the first Matrix. She was our projectionist.
What do? I help with dailies. I make leaders, which is what I'm doing now. And I code the film. Do you want to have a look?
What does that do?
It actually puts rubber numbers on the sprockets on the edge of the film. So when they come to post and they need to cut the film, they run off the code numbers.
At last.
When you shoot a conventional movie, you're shooting a big dialogue scene. Basically, the director ends up shooting a lot of coverage. You know, you shoot close-ups and two shots and over the shoulders, and you put all that together into a scene. When you're shooting something like a wire fight, the stuff is pretty tightly choreographed. And what you'll end up doing is maybe doing multiple cameras and a certain amount of overlapping action, meaning that the actor leaps through the air and lands a punch. So maybe the punch is overlapped. And the next shot picks up, simulating the leap, jumping down and starting to punch and then going into the next stage of the fight. Your options in scenes like that are angles and overall pacing. The freeway scene is, I think at its heart, a conventional in-camera scene that's heavily uses visual effects to realize its vision, but at its heart, it's shot in camera. I mean, I don't see how as an editor you read this scene and you say, you just sort of rub your hands together. The scene is 15 minutes long. It's just all about editing. The thing that's great about the way Andy and Larry shoot is almost every angle introduces new information. Reloaded is truly going to be the sum of a lot of small scenes. It's going to be very, very densely paced. It's going to be really fast. Although there are times we're really going to just sort of slow it down for these very, very difficult dialogue scenes. And to try to find that overall balance is going to be a lot of fun and really interesting. This is our visual effects division of editorial. Jody is the visual effects editor. Bridget is the assistant visual effects editor. Why don't you talk to these guys?
Basically, what we do is track and organize and manage all of the elements that they shoot on set. There are thousands and thousands. Once it comes here, Zach edits, and all the various elements that go along with the shot to composite it together go funnel through us. We scan it and send it on to the vendor. And
it's a really, really important job. It's a really big job because when I edit the scene, there's basically, I edit with what I call the hero element. And a lot of the stuff that's visual effects shots, they'll do, 8 or 10 passes in time. They'll do passes for backgrounds and passes for elements like smoke or atmosphere and passes for lighting, and they'll do clean passes so that you can take something out of a frame. And so Jody works very carefully with the visual effects people across the hall to make sure they get everything they need. And she sits in.
He doesn't work carefully at all.
One of the things I really like about Revolutions is the fact that the first half of the movie is, at least by Matrix terms, a fairly conventional movie. And then the second half, once the siege starts, it's almost nonstop action. I tried very hard to keep the first half of the movie tense, because the whole movie is ultimately going to have a very tense vibe to it, right up till the very end. There are small things, like how often the so-called 180-degree rule gets broken, which I think probably most of the people who are watching this understand, but it simply means that if you have a circle and you've divided it in half, and the camera's on one side of that circle, on the next cut, it should not cross that line to the second half, to the other half of that circle. So in the case of the Wachowski brothers, they have a certain very organic idea of how they're shooting things. And if that idea occasionally encompasses things like breaking the 180-degree rule, they've thought it through very carefully in advance.
You're empty. So are you.
If you notice, it tends to mostly get broken in the fight scenes. Because, and it's really, I'll tell you something, it's a simple approach to coverage. But once you've done it enough, then it can become an interesting bit of style, a bit of craft. When we made The Siege, I took the previses, I worked with them extensively, showed them to Larry and Andy, and we made extensive changes, both in the shots that ended up in the movies and the shots we deleted. We were able to use it as a tool for cost effectiveness, for time effectiveness, for just making the scene. I personally feel very lucky to have been able to participate on these 3 movies because they really give you a palette and a chance to do work that I love doing.
It's a typical and a beautiful shot for second unit. Second unit excel at this type of work. This is what we're made for, we're designed for. We love blowing things up. Basically, I think the job, the second unit, and particularly my job, is to get the stuff that the main unit haven't got time to do for whatever reason. Did you get the impression about the companies too, maybe? Exactly.
It's like the wreckage that's left over. It's 3 different scenes every day, bits of stuff that we started shooting 10 months ago. Moving, sort of heavy bits of metal through space very precisely, incredibly fast.
We've been doing different types of things, from traditional second unit work, like the classic insert of a bullet hitting, to a lot of, visual effects-oriented shots. My direction comes from the brothers, so in conversation with them, I'll talk about the type of thing they want. There might be a storyboard reference or a pre-visualisation, which I can work on. It starts off with a conversation, then I might go and set up a scene and show them, is this the type of thing you think? They might say, yeah, but maybe change the angle.
We should do one version where he just glares at him and slams it, in case the dialogue is intercut in another scene.
So it's a dialogue that goes on, but the end result is to get what they want for their films. See, this is what second unit do. This is a lovely Saturday, really hot, sunny day in Sydney, and the brothers said you have to get out in the city and shoot cars and shoot backplates, and you'll see it appear in a scene. Seraph driving the car on the way to the Oracle.
I have to see her.
Second unit on the Burly Man operate at their best when they're left to their own mad devices.
3, 2, 1, rock!
We did some of the Super Burly Brawl, where we put a camera up on the roof and it was isolated and spinning down. We liked that one.
I suppose we did do a majority of Trinity Falls, with the exception of maybe one shot or something like that.
Thank you very much.
The very high-speed track we built, which basically comes past Trinity and pans and sort of goes away from her to represent her kind of falling down the building. That was 5 months of working out how to make a camera go that fast, safely, and pass Carrie-Anne Moss by about 1.5 feet past her shoulder.
You're a little late. Got a touch earlier, yeah?
When I had the first conversation with the brothers, and they said it wasn't enough work for them to just do the 2 sequels. They had to do a game as well. Well, in fact, the first day I started, we had the Hong Kong Wire team. We were doing a big stunt sequence with Roy Jones Jr. And I thought, well, this is the first day. It doesn't get much better than that.
1, 2, 3!
In fact, I went up to Wu Ping and said, it's a great privilege to work with you, Wu Ping, and somebody pointed out, well, actually, that's not Wu Ping. That's Fish, but this is Wu Ping over here. That was my beginning, day one.
Which, in particular, was your favourite shot?
The one up on the tower there. That it actually turned out to, I think, to be the best angle to shows off the entire set, shows off the entire explosion. It's the only angle that really gets the whole event in the one shot. It's a cool shot. This scene is actually sort of equates a little to the fireball explosion in the government lobby in the first movie. we shot that as well, and that was a lot of fun because like flames are great in slow motion. You get to get down there in deep exposure, and you get a really great color out of the flames and fireballs kind of like rolling across the ground and stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a signature thing in the Matrix.
Julia and I had a thing going for a while there, but her teeth were a bit too big for me. You know, she's got some big choppers.
The second unit to me is like a mad European family. There's a lot of crazy things happening. But generally the mood is pretty good. We try and keep it up because by the nature of the type of work you're doing on second unit, which is, at times it can be a laborious task, so we try and maintain a lighter air to the sense of humour about it. So.
Yeah, blowing things up for those of you who can't understand.
Oh no, White Island's good. White Island's good. The light's better over here. Give me a more specific light.
It's just a huge thing. It's like the scale of it. The density of the filming is enormous.
The other day somebody said, what do you think about scene 727? That's scene 727. It's like, how can you hold 727 scenes? And there's 760 or something in these two movies.
Action!
It's a different movie in some senses than the first one. It's a larger canvas. As a painter, you take up a large painting and a small painting, and it's an entirely different feeling that you're going to come up with. The tools you'd use to make one are not necessarily the tools you need for another one. You know, left high school, I went to University of Virginia and went to the architecture school there. My parents gave me the money to go to Europe for the summer. And I went to New York on the way there, and I never got to Europe, actually. I just took film courses. So then I went to NYU graduate school, started concentrating on shooting movies, moved to LA and MTV, and here I am. I remember when I started a movie a long time ago, I was doing a lot of MTV, and the director wanted me to do a feature, and she was concerned that I had done so many short projects that I wouldn't have the stamina to last through a feature. Well, the first movie I did was Darkman. That was 119 days. Army of Darkness was 118 days. We just did 267. My job is to actually be there and think about the shot, one chain link at a time. And if I go too far into the future, inevitably there's a mistake on the set where I should be. So I live only in the present. It evolves while you're doing it. It evolves while you're making it up. It evolves while they're lens up, while you light it, from take to take. It's constantly changing. Take 4 is not like take 3, and in the Brothers' case, take 57 is not like take 22. I don't know. It's hard to tell what it really looks like. People are constantly coming up to Larry and Andy and saying, "What's going to happen in this shot?" And they say, "Give me the viewfinder and give me the actors, and I'll tell you what's going to happen in this shot." You could do your profile as you like.
Tone profile, you mean? Yeah, but I thought it would be a better cut to go this way if you want to come in on that angle.
It's not until you actually do it that you know what it's going to be. They, like the best directors, put their brains on the screen. They put their own desires and wants and concerns on the screen. They care more about composition than I care about composition. And that's why they line up every shot with the finder first. They're extremely specific about it. You know, when you short side, you know, when you're framing somebody, they're talking this way, and you do this, or you force somebody against, you force people apart, you can just say alienation. You always try to find a way to do whatever they want to do. Sometimes you have to tell them no. Sometimes it's just impossible. I'm sure they even thought about actually building Zion. I'm sure it'll be slightly smaller than Sydney. And let's build it in the middle of the earth. Why not? I'm suing this. We did the freeway scene in San Francisco because there's enough stuntmen in America to do this freeway scene. And they drive on the right side of the street, and the runway was available here. Once you get past all the physical stuff, is getting the camera in places where it hasn't been in most car chases. But really the hardest part is that Larry and Andy wanted to shoot the sequence in content continuity on a freeway which goes east-west and north-south. Hasn't anybody else told you this stuff? Burley Brawl is not really a challenge to me, that's a reward. Burley Brawl is a long period of time in a place that I have total control. Perfect size place, perfect facility, plenty of room, enough time and money to prep it. It's nice. We got a quad place. The system working here is sort of a hybrid stereoptic camera. So they could do head replacement, basically. So you have a stereoptic view of the actors, so they could locate them in space, and they could replace the stuntmen's heads with Hugo's head. And this sequence is because of we wanted a ethnic mix in the crowd of thousands that can be found in Australia. It's a bit of a hardship sometimes to work in an aircraft hangar because it's not made to be shot. There's like 60 girders crossing right there over Morpheus's head. It drives me crazy sometimes. The Matrix code was originally conceived to look like rain. It was supposed to look like water coming down the screen. So when you actually have rain, you of course want to allude to the Matrix code rain. So you want everything that can look like code to remind you of code. So we wanted fat rain, which we ended up with large nozzles and huge amounts of water. We used some different shutter angles. We used some drop frame stuff. We used strobes. Again, it's always a combination thing. This works for this shot. This doesn't work for that shot. This works for that shot. This doesn't work for that shot. In good effects movies, that's usually what it is. You arrive at any effect, any end product through a number of different means so that as you see it in different points in the movie, you can never quite put it together how it's done. It also, it lends it a life. It looks more organic that way rather than predictable. The lightning is entirely timed to the performance. The first time we ever did lightning was when Morpheus turns around and greets Neo, and the lightning strikes are absolutely specifically timed. In the end, we just cut to the chase and gave them the lightning boxes and let them do the lightning. And being excellent at video games, they were perfect.
Set, and act.
Can't sheep at home.
Why? I get paid to count sheep here. Are they giving me some dialogue coaching?
You say sheep.
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 Sheep. Sheep.
Hey, I haven't signed a release for this sort of treatment. You know, I've spent 4 or 5 years on these 3 movies. I've never had any other job for 5 years. It's got a long day. I don't know. I don't think I can sum it up, really. It's going to be years before I can sum it up. I may name other movies that I think of that are as important. Hopefully I will, but it will probably be the major work of my life. Grip electric camera crews are world class. They're as good as any crew in the world.
My name's Brownie. I'm one of the key grips on the job.
My name's Reg Garside. I'm the gaffer on Matrix 2 and 3. The electrics in Australia, we look after everything that's got to do with lights, including all the C-stands, the cutters, the gels, the diffusions, the blacks, and all that sort of stuff.
Okay. Let's put the water on.
In Australia, the grips are obviously in charge of all the camera movement. You put up the green screens, general support rigging for electrics on set.
Or was it the circuits are off?
That's why it didn't work.
We do total support structure for the camera department.
I was good. A little bit later on the glasses.
The movie is so big, it's so complicated that they run their own fiefdoms.
That sort of comes down as a rimmer, so it should run that way.
I can adjust that while it's up there. You just lock it off there.
We run a 24-hour-a-day grip department, 5 days a week. The scale of these movies is no way you could build this in the morning and pack it up and go home at night.
Brownie has to run his ship, and Reggie has to run his ship, and they consult with me, but we're all three equal. Many, many creative decisions are made solely by them.
Yeah, if we say in the Mega Man.
What Bill does is he tends to leave a lot of the set lighting to us as a lighting department.
Reg moves ahead and lights the sets in advance. We talk about it, but specifically, I don't really know. You know, I want a soft light here, and I want a hard shaft there, and I want there's some explosions, and this has got to happen. And Reggie I can just see him going, okay, I need to get lightning strikes, and it's like flicking them off.
Is that light coming into here?
No, it's not, mate. What I've got your lads used to do for me there is take it off on use atmosphere. When you work with a guy for a year and a half, nearly 2 years, it's it becomes pretty easy. Your thoughts are almost the same.
He'll light a set, I'll go by and put my 2 cents in, which I've never done with anybody else, really.
We use a lot of soft lights, a lot of bounce lights. There's not very many hard lights. A lot of our sets we've used up to 1,000, 2,000 cans in the roof just to get us up to the light levels we need. Light up, please, Scotty. We had a lot of light up there. We had a lot of light. Just have to move this around, mate. Just need to get another reading on this. We've wanted to light for speed because, we've only got a certain amount of time. So we could shoot virtually any way at any single time. The brothers like to be able to shoot all over the place.
There's one thing I want to say about the grip department. I won't say it on film, Mark.
That was our leader. And the rigs for cable cams and flying cameras was probably the highlight from a gripping point of view of what all the lads done. That's very impressive. And that speed is variable. The expectation that's laid out and passed down the line is obviously ginormous. You've got to do a lot of controlling to keep what they need out of the camera. Matrix introduced us to visual effects with green screen and blue screens.
Yeah, brought into being just a green screen unit or a blue screen unit. And basically their job is to go around and obviously blue and green screen all the stages that we need.
It's a cut.
It's a huge effort to do. You can see this set here, this is in the real world. All the colours, they tend to lean towards blue. So we can't use any blue screen around them because we'll start losing them when we start digitising and mucking around with them in visual effects. So that's why we've gone with green. Vice versa, when we're in the Matrix, it's green, so we have to use blue screens. What we've got here, guys, is we've got a designated wet area and a dry area. All our cables are being kept off the floor because of any mishaps, anything happens. People walking around, they traipse water around with them when it gets wet. There's 700 amps of phase running around underneath all this rigging here, which is a lot of power.
Biggest problem was liaising with special effects, figuring out where their water's going to go, and then making sure that everything that we've got rigged above, around the set is fully protected, no one gets electrocuted.
Action!
These guys have upwards of 2 to 3 stages being rigged all at the same time. We've had 160 sets to do on this job. It's been a pretty mammoth task. These guys here are responsible for that.
Grips and electrics are got to be a very close bond. I never think twice about what's hanging above my head, and that's a credit to them.
Ah, look, what does it say? What?
Over this last 12 months, we've probably crammed about 5 years' worth of film experience just into this 1 year.
That's a good guess. A big component of the art department is the construction of all these sets. It's a lot of construction.
I worked here, you know, originally I went to America and we discussed what we were going to do, and I came back and I worked here in Sydney and made some plans, and then Hugh came on for a while and we worked together, and then we started to shoot.
We've got 16 sets up at the moment in the 5 stages. They start shoot today. One set, and some of the sets we're in are in for only half a day. There's a lot of movement between areas in the second film that moves at a pretty fast pace, so they do a lot of sort of travelling between spaces. And 5 stages and 140 sets in 8 months is a bit of a nightmare. So it's going to be pretty tough for those guys for the next 8 months. This is our usual Monday afternoon comedy review, where we try and go through everything and see if we're up to date. So we should get our first rushes clearance on Monday and go and start pulling down the sets. As soon as you start building them, start pulling them down. That's great. This is the coordination area of the art department. Being such a big movie, we need to have a few people around here who take care of us and take care of day-to-day business. Art director's den. They do what art directors do most of the time. The design, the heart of the construction area, these people take care of all the plans for all the sets after the concepts are done.
There's 3 art directors. We split up the sets into our various components and who was going to do what. So most of the Super Brawl is all mine, and Catherine's doing a lot of the Zion stuff, and Charlie's doing a lot of a lot of fight sequences and a lot of second unit.
Computer design area. We have various things. Jonathan's doing the Sentinel. Andrew's been doing a lot of the Zion stuff that we had started in America. We're finishing off over here and turning into working drawings that our construction guys can understand and read. Screen graphics area, which we're in doing our own in-house manufacture of all our screen graphics for the Nebuchadnezzar, the control room, and the whole interface is happening in this area over here. Basically, by having it in-house, we get to fiddle around more with it and get more out of it rather than farm it out. We have in this building in a minute a set design department, set decoration. We've got our coordinating department up there with PAs and apprentices and all sorts of people. And on the other half of the building, we've got about another 50 people over there who work for the prop manufacture department. They'll make up all props and dressings and weapons that the wire guys want to use, and just about everything.
Is that a smooth left to right? That's enough. Very smooth look down. That's it.
You know, everything I think flows from Larry and Andy's mind, and to be able to take that along with everyone else on this kind of journey from being a written word to a drawing on a piece of paper to an image to something that's physically built or imaginarily built in a computer, it is a wonderful thing.
Come on together, because you want them to move at the same time, yeah. Sarah sort of goes by her. Morpheus just scoops her. And the moment that Sarah is like, Morpheus turns into
fire. And you're going to go that way, and you two guys are going to go that way.
522, take 5.
Can I take your... Oh my God.
The hell coat check, they wanted everybody to have the feeling that they're like bat people. They could just walk up the walls and walk on the ceilings and have basically a gunfight taking place with our bad guys on the ceiling and our principal actors, the good guys, on the floor.
It's kind of an anti-gravity thing. The bad guys are upside down, running around on the ceiling like insects and cockroaches. Our good guys are peeling around columns, and we end up with a number of individual duels.
But they didn't want to turn the set upside down. They wanted to do it real time so you could see gravity, gun shells coming out, debris falling. Everything was falling in the proper direction. So I basically gave that set over to Glenn Boswell and his guys, and they put together these small overhead tracks and practiced stuff up in the gym. We came up with some scenarios. We bounced a few things off each other, and we drew up some plans, and we shot some footage for the brothers, made approvals, and that was their set.
Been working pretty hard for maybe about 2.5 months, trying to develop the moves and get the action and train, because the guys spend a lot of time upside down. So that takes a lot of work just to be able to get acclimatised to that, so they can get in position, wait for cameras to turn over, and then still be able to be conscious, basically, so they can do all their actions. And of course, spend a lot of time with wardrobe, because when we were rehearsing this, we've been at this for a couple of months now, all the problems we had with losing traction, or if the footwear's too heavy, you can't move properly. So they spent a lot of time with wardrobe, so wardrobe developed what they needed and were really helpful in being able to give them clothing that would accommodate their movements.
Chin goes in the hole.
There we go. And then he needs to wear his harness under his pants.
It was 7 days of full gunfire and pyrotechnics, and to work out where the characters were placed in the room at any one given point, and the level of destruction as we moved through the room was quite complex.
I've spent, I don't know how many nights with cameras and a model, kind of trying to find the frames, to find where we'd place bullet hits that would work, with the actors being in the supposed position so they'd be safe in frame, that we'd have enough foreground, background, like literally trying to compose just the dots. It took a long time.
I started more like this on an angle, because that way I'm heading, that's the angle. I'm already angled.
And then you just need... I did a couple of things in one take in there, big things. And you have to remember, to do something like that in one take means that the explosive guys have to be in sync with me. The camera, I mean, everybody has to do it, be in sync and get it right. It's not just about me getting it right.
We're just trying to work out Carrie-Anne's action is going to impede our camera shot.
So we'll do another rehearsal. We're just going to move the camera closest to its
And now we're going to get into it here. Lens is right in the action. 27 action mil lens.
How are you going to catch me though if I have guns?
I'll catch her. Hey guys, when I catch her, do you want to get the guns before I put her down? Do you want me to just hold her, take the guns down? What's going to work best for you guys?
It's probably better to get him away from her, because that way if she bobbles as he's trying to let her go.
It's very fast-paced. It will cut together like bang, 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 and then we'll be out of it into the disco.
Okay, fire a shot. 3, 2, 1. And there you go. I'm still here. I was doing fireworks for about 6 years. I've been in the film industry, I think, for about 8 years. Like anything, it's a giant team effort. Luckily, our leader, Steve Courtley's a major pyro head, which is always a helping hand. One thing about these movies, apart from any other I've worked on, the directors clearly know what they want. If you go and show them something which is pretty funky and sort of cool looking, they'll go with it. This pillar we're looking at in the background comes from the railway station. Like most times when we're doing pillar work, there seems to be actors wanting to be right up close to the action when these things fire, and you've got to say to them, you can be there, you're going to be safe, and you don't need eye protection, and that's what we're sort of coming to terms with all the time. Once again, they don't put stunt doubles in. There's a real actors going inside these pillars, and there's a train man firing at them and trying to kill them. This is always the bad joke. You go up to the actors and you say, I'm the explosives person. You just say, hello, you know, you do the old missing fingers trick. Yeah. It's like anything, you can't tell where's hard and where's soft. There's two zones in this. There's actually a hard area and there's a soft area. That's half the trick of good special effects is tricking everybody to where the fake starts and the real begins.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, the firing box that we mainly use and have done for a number of years on all the Matrix films has been this one. It's made here in Australia. It's got the ability to fire a multiple sequence in a very fast order. Okay, firing a shot! Firing in 3, 2, 1. This is just an arcing lance, and it gives an effect like an electrical short. That's a blue one, and we've also got a green one as well.
And action.
See these sort of effects twinkling away in the background? Inside the dead sentinels, we did this. It's a little bit more of a subtle effect, a little bit less smoke, but it's basically a short circuit type look. Trains have been a bit of a major thing in these movies. Firing, 3, 2, 1. For all effect, that emulated the train was locking up. This one here was used in the Merovingian main deck, firing 3, 2, 1. Pretty simple. It's basically titanium and some gunpowder, and we made lots of those and fired lots of them on set. They became quite useful. This is another little spark device. This is called a Z, firing in 3, 2, 1. That gets used a lot, once again, and there's a big crash scene or something. Okay, I'm going to fire one off to start with. Okay, that's the look of a Z. And I'll go into a multi-shot at 200 milliseconds, so I'll just wrap through. Firing in 3, 2, 1. It's a typical look of a ricochet bullet. This is something we made for once again, the Merovingian. I wouldn't suggest anybody at home attempting this. This is a good little spark device. Firing. We were up in the rafters, up above the set with these, and we had our crew members firing these down on the actors. We don't know whether they were trying to hit them or not, but the actors didn't seem deterred by this. And of course, the most important part is safety. Safety in an environment like this. There's no smoking, there's no open flame, there's no mobile phones. It's been drummed into everybody from the start. Safety, safety, safety.
Physical effects will generate an effect, but using a physical means to achieve the effect.
Now.
We're moving from the type of effects that are normally called for into the type of effects that really were the representation of a comic book coming to life. It was as though totally unnatural things were happening naturally.
Steve's great. You know, like most of the heads of departments, he's really the top of his field in Australia and in this part of the world.
We have an engineering department, gags department, pyro department, and the breakaways department.
And he'd show me what he had in mind, and we bounced a lot of ideas off each other and what we're going to do, and he's built some great rigs. He's got a really good crew.
Okay, we charged up here. Okay. 3, 2, 1, action. Hey, you just got to say there. Okay.
As he's starting to push, it's disappearing from behind him.
That's what it looks like. That's what I was going to say. Like, it had nothing. Like, when I did it on the wood, it was easy. I could really push off, but there it felt like there was nothing there to push off. Yeah.
It was all that way in between, so all we've got to do now is try and work out when it's good to actually lose the wall from underneath you.
Action!
Visual effects are fantastic with a predictable nature of something, and becomes more and more difficult if it's less predictable. So physical effects have a very relevant place in producing things that have some chaos attached to them.
We're like scars on someone's face. We give it a bit of harshness or a bit of imperfection.
Working with Steve and his crew, we've worked together so many times that if he tells me what's going to happen, then I believe that's what's going to happen. So which made my job a lot easier, because that was one area I didn't have to worry about.
I've known Steve for, let's think, about 4 or 5 years now. But basically started working for him on Matrix 1. When you need a little bit of a direction or you're sort of stuck, you go and see Steve. He'll come in, he'll set you on your path, and usually it's fine and dandy from that point on.
We've got to divide it up. Someone's going to do the files.
Yep.
So
Lilly
I think
did them last
is KT, maybe KT around.
I think it's going back to
If they're breaking into a wall, we'll develop up a wall and try and get a look that sees them smash into a wall. We rebuild sets quite a lot, but in an effects version of a set, then take out the art department set, put in an effects set. We've got so many different tasks going on at so many different times. By the time we get the information of what we want to see on something like an exploding sentinel, we're almost already shooting the result of that exploding sentinel. So we're kind of working backwards a lot of the time.
And just go in there and sort of score it so you get a couple of more little shards.
All right, so the size that you're looking for is more like if that was divided into 4 or something like that.
Right. Specifically, I would say that we'd want it to happen at the main crack zone.
There's a lot of bullet effects, breakaway banisters, a pyrotechnic sequence. We were making the APU working, it's a 3-ton behemoth. Gimbal arrangement for the cockpits and the motion base for the APU. Statues, walls, something that has required some tricky engineering. Collapsing, breaking armory, there's a lot of things crashing through sets. There's a lot of stuff, and usually paint is still wet when things go down to the set.
What's up? Rehearsal and action!
Cut!
And from there we go into a whole bunch of other sequences that it just keeps on going. It doesn't stop. It's unrelenting.
Lights up, please, and cut!
Okay, boom. You'll note that it's covered in a matte surface, which is thermal camouflaging. It's designed to be shoot around corners. We need guns, more guns.
Here we have the weapons which the lead characters use for probably the biggest shootout in the film. These weapons are nearly all highly prohibited here in Australia. This is the latest G36 German assault rifle.
Designed and built in Australia, I might add, by some of the most intellectually forward people in the industry.
Morpheus is armed with an MP5K and a aim-point red dot sight. Seraph with a Browning BDM, and Trinity with a Beretta 92 compact.
I don't like the gun. I don't like the gun at all. Because you have to worry when you're dealing with guns. You have to be careful, and you have to really question and look and check.
The weapons are armed and in, 1 round apiece.
Ah, I don't like it. I don't like having bullets in it.
Okay.
Sorry.
So that acts as a completely independent unit. One character, Pinball, is carrying 2 Browning BDMs. Another character carrying 2 Glocks. A character carrying 2 Berettas. The man at the gun check packing a Scorpion. Can have a 100-round drum saddle magazine.
Multiple caliber.
The brothers have chosen an array of weapons that cover from the turn of the century on up. Weapons which are either well-known and have classic looks or are very new and are likely to have classic looks in the future. The M16, the Uzi submachine gun,
The Australian F1,
Mauser,
MP5, 9mm submachine gun,
Nambus,
1928 Thompson, HK21 automatic rifle, micro Uzis, the G36, the Patchet, Bazooka, Kepler,
Beretta,
6.5mm,
Colt revolvers,
Scorpion 36mm grenade launcher. And if you put it in a beer and go, it'll suck it all up.
That's it.
That's the one.
There you go. This is the gaffer gun.
I'm an extra.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a bit weird seeing everybody dressed in fetish in the daylight. It's a bit like the vampires have been let out of their cages or something.
What am I expecting?
Yeah.
I'm expecting to find some video recorders that I can take away into a little corner.
I'll give you another one. What are their names?
Yeah, Andy and Larry Wachowski.
Oh, I never heard of them.
I actually dance with a snake, but I'm not dancing with the snake in this films.
I used to be a showgirl, but my name's not Laura.
I'm an aspiring actor.
I got a perm especially for The Matrix.
A lot of these people, it's their second nature because they're party animals, so I think we're all used to it, yeah.
So I've been standing around with my perm all day, just waiting to be seen by the world.
I felt for those extras because most of them all were wearing their own costumes, and there was a lot of latex and a lot of PVC, and a couple people fainted and had to people were allergic to the latex and realized it too late, after they were in it.
We've got to polish up all of the latex, and they weren't wearing latex. They were wearing PVC, so they're as shiny as they can get.
We wanted to have the feeling of fairy tale characters. So we made people that looked like satyrs and ponies, and there's kind of a melding of the human and the inhuman as part of their character.
Well, so much for my potential political career.
Okay, these 2 gorgeous, lovely ladies. Why don't you be see a young woman? So, now, all right, you're going to go back. This gentleman will get underneath your little kneecap and push your body up in the air. Will you stay high at all times? I am the Statue of Liberty. Bring your body through, arch up, and growl, and maybe a few of those arms out the front, ma'am. No, I see it's definitely here, sir, with the shoe on your mouth. If you had a thong or a sneaker, there'd be another story, wouldn't it?
You are now Group A. You are required Thursday. You will be required Friday. Cool. All right, well, you're with us for the week. Let's go.
that about 50 that you just sent me? Can I just have everyone's attention there for a second?
Try it, please.
So just give us a bit of quiet just for 1 minute. Hey, so first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming in today. I know Cha-Cha has been working with some of you, and we have a group here in the centre, and then so maybe the people from the back come forward a bit, so there's like at this end position, there's a good, nice, tight ring around them.
Here, hang on to that, lean back, hold this position, and even if you stretch back, do you understand stretching back this way?
It's rehearsal without the camera.
Good girl.
Yeah, it's good. There's a lot of interesting people here. There's like lots of different categories, and goths and ferals and modern primitives and V&D type people. They tend to stick to their own kind of community rather than bring them together like they've done for this movie.
Hey, so the big note from that tape was you got to look meaner. So you're hot, you're sweaty, you're tired, you're mean. Check the game, it's good tape.
We had this Zion scene that was all about beauty and expression and love and passion. And then we had this Hell Club scene, which was about just the darker side of that, I suppose. And those people were under very, very hardcore circumstances. They worked hard.
I didn't know anybody here. I made some inquiries before I left the United States about several people, and I interviewed 4 or 5 guys and hired Glenn Boswell, who was the coordinator on the first picture, and the team that he's brought to the movie has been fantastic.
I brought back some of the crew from the first film, and I also brought back some new guys that I'd been working with since the last Matrix, which is about over the last 2 or 3 years.
Those guys are crazy.
The Australians and the Americans have been having a great time on this. Initially, we were sort of a bit sceptical. We thought, oh, the Americans come over, how are we going to get along with them, blah, blah, blah. But it couldn't have been better. Even after 12 months, we still like each other.
I think they're great. I mean, there's a lot of talent here. The enthusiasm level is fantastic, and they're on their own. I mean, again, one person can't do this picture. So Glenn is definitely running his department alongside me.
I think what we need to do next is look up our 2 to 1, take this up, and try our takeoffs.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Just get up there and shorten that. Yeah, shorten that as much as you can. So we go straight up and down pull.
This time around, it turned out we had the wire team and they had the stunt department. And then we had riggers that would float between the stunt department and the wire team. The wire team took care of the fight work and the kung fu work and the flying within the kung fu scenes, whereas the stunt department did the wire work and the action outside the kung fu.
Initially, one of the biggest shots that we do is the opening shot when all the 4 gentlemen here have to take off, have a shot at the same time. And Bobby, who's actually on a rig we developed with the Americans called the Super Core rig, could tell you a bit about that?
It's a gimbal type rig with an arm in the front, and inside there's a ring inside a ring, and you basically can run around and turn any way on the roof, up, down, left, right, while firing guns. It's pretty cool.
Actually, the reason we developed that is to give actual mass to what we do, so there's actually an interaction between the character and the surface we're working with, so it's not light or they don't pendulum away from it, but they actually impact the surfaces as they run up. For instance, when Bobby ran up on the pillar and then on the roof, and we always gave him positive, so he's actually working against the ceiling and the wall, and that's how we've been trying to develop all this action in this Hell coat check room.
The best way is to slam me into that
There
hole.
we go, action. And action. The track system we developed evolved really out of all the things we originally tried to do over the last 2 months. Just because we've got a ceiling piece, we're always looking up and we always see the ceilings.
The track that we're actually using, which is just up in the ceiling here, is actually a yachting track, which is used on the 12-metre skiffs. And the cars that we use on this particular track are designed to run freely with ball bearings, so we can pull them and move them quite quickly along the track. We can configure them with pulleys for our flying systems, or with single dropper lines, so that we can be fixed and then just run on a single cable.
Alex has to do a move. We actually cartwheels along the top of the roof, using the grid as an impact to push off and keep his momentum going.
Basically, I'm picked from either side here, if you can see. I have going up to 2 cars which run along 2 tracks, and I can't really touch this piece very much at all, otherwise it will crack, so it makes it quite difficult. And also I'm in a gas mask as well, so I don't really have much peripheral vision.
I have to kick this guy and he goes through the wall and he gets stuck into the wall. And every time I did the kick, I had my eyes closed until they said he was okay.
Let's go up with Carrie-Anne.
Why is he pointing at his head?
That means I'm fine.
I thought he was saying my head.
It's a diving signal that says I'm all right.
Oh my God.
They're just a great group of guys. I never knew stuntmen until this film, and stuntmen and stuntwomen are very, very special people.
You okay?
Yeah, fine.
This is the Nebuchadnezzar on approach, requesting access through Gate 3.
Nebuchadnezzar, this is Zion Control. Maintain present velocity and stand by. The Nebuchadnezzar is down. Base 7.
Understood.
Zion was kind of a purposeful contrast to the minimalist contemporary vibe of The Matrix.
Zion's semi-retro kind of design that carries across from the almost Victorian period, or the 30s of when they built the Bay Bridge or the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and big industrial kind of works. There's that kind of engineering quality.
Zion is the kind of society that is, in a way, a free society, a democratic society, where everyone inside that society understands and knows what their role is.
It's a world that is multi-ethnic, and primarily, I would say the majority of people are people of color.
I thought the representation of all the ethnic groups was just, you've never seen that in a science fiction movie at that capacity.
It's mostly like African American, or Black and Hispanic and Asian, and it's just a real mix of people that are non-white or Caucasian, which is what you usually see in most films.
So Zion, I think, is one of those rare occurrences in Hollywood where it reflects what I guess we're calling multiculturalism now.
We're standing in the sewer set. So this is kind of like at the very bottom of the S-bend. So if you imagine the S-bend in your bathroom down the bottom where all the rings and the crap ends up, this is it. You're at the very bottom of it, amongst all the Rio and the crap that's been washed down here over like 1,000 years. And we figured that at this point the world had got so successful because of the kind of underclass of machines, their slave class, they'd been able to have these big mega cities, and these big sewers were here to support those big cities. The whole sewer might have been made up of a whole lot of little pipes, which are still huge pipes, like the one on our left, my left here, is a huge pipe where, you know, maintenance vehicles and things like that can go. But it's a difficult set to kind of work in. I think it's a really difficult set for the crew. It's very tight, very confined, and as you can see, all are very strong. You have to be very strong to carry all these big pieces of concrete around.
Zion's made up, if you like, of a landing area, which we call the dock, where all the ships, all the hovercraft come in and land, and it's a defence area for the population of Zion.
So I think the first drawing I did of the dock, I don't know, it took me 2.5, 3 weeks or something, because it was so labor-intensive and figuring out the perspective. And Owen had done a schematic of what the basic shape and what the levels were, because it was almost like steps that would lead down to the main, like, sewer drain, if you want.
It's kind of like a huge septic tank that's been built into a landing base, where there's cranes and machinery and workshops for working on these hovercraft.
I put like a railroad track around it, because I kept thinking of, have you ever seen like a railroad junction where all the trains come in? And I put that crane on top of the elevator. See, there's action, even when there is no action, there's movement.
And then you go down below the dock via elevators through bedrock where the command centre is, where Harmon has his office and Locke has his command centre. And then you go down below the command level, you go down into the bottomless pit. And it's like a giant sinkhole, and it's like 7,000 feet deep, which is where 250,000 people live.
It's good to be home.
We kind of set it up so that the people were above the council. A democracy, in that you had representatives there from each of the ships, or representatives from each level of the bottomless pit. So what we have suggested, without being too accurate, is that this structure, whoever built it, we've added a kind of patina of the centuries. We have a lot of rust. They used polystyrene and they laid it onto the flash and they burnt it all with a heater. And you had this fantastic metal sense, because all of Zion's basically metal, there's no wood. So all the chairs that are in that set, they are all chairs out of the Merovingian's restaurant.
It was kind of a Colosseum kind of space to an extent, but basically it had to be all metal. So it felt like you were, contained in a tin can.
And then you go down below the council to the residence area. There are all these kind of faceless buildings where the residents of Zion live. And every 43 metres there's a major kind of level, and in between it there are 10 levels of houses ringing around this naturally formed sinkhole. There's a little model which is the extent of what we will build. It's all made of steel, it's quite structural. There'll be a green screen here and above it at each end, and the visual effects department will build this repetitive kind of design that it has around to create the illusion of the full kind of residence area.
It is this thrown together, makeshift world that these people have been forced to live in, and they made the best of a fairly terrible situation.
Where's my pussy? Hey! Hey! Good to see human ingenuity and how they built up, this world that exists and as many of the conveniences that they could have. Loved it, and it was really great. Like, they have the food growing, the mushrooms. They were like really homey, like all these like handcrafted like little things. Like maybe they all put it together themselves.
So in the first film, everyone lived in a little red house on the outside of a big cylinder. It was the power plant, a pod. And in this film, everyone lives on the inside of a cylinder in a little red hole.
Basically, Zion, it's the power pods in reverse. Instead of projecting from a cylinder, they're living inside a cylinder. They've escaped from one environment to basically live in the same environment. Although they're free, and that's an important part of it.
At the bottom of Zion, there's a huge cave or cavern which the people of Zion use as a gathering place.
Here, Larry and Andy wanted to have the feeling of the natural earth, like we're going almost kind of like back to the womb. Something like a church or a big cathedral.
The super cool part about that particular space was creating it based off the pictures we found in National Geographic about massive underground caves and a lot of photographs of Bryce Canyon sort of rock formations.
The cave is probably half a mile long. Through the use of visual effects, John Gator and his team will
increase the height of what we have built to 300 odd feet right in the center at its highest point. Luckily, it's got fabulous acoustics, so someone just whispering can be heard all the way down at the back end.
I give you more.
And then you go down below the caves and they'd have what's called the engineering.
The engine room was sort of beautiful, strangely beautiful, heavily detailed, and almost convoluted underground world. Effectively a steam energy plant that is where the geothermal energy is derived to power up the city. We based some of those environments off of Jeff Darrow drawings.
Some of these drawings are like this big, and I'd have like this much done after a day.
My theory is that the machines purpose-built Zion for the human beings, but you have to have balance within the system so that you could have a matrix. Within that, there has to be a sense of freedom or rebellion, so you have to have a Zion.
We wanted to do an old-fashioned fist fight, John Wayne fist fight. It's dark, it's fun, it's pushy.
Try not to move too much, right? Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to go at full pace. So, however, if he was going to shorten his start mark up, that he can, once he sees that you're about to get there, he can just like bound on the gun.
This is the only fight that takes place in the real world in which they have no powers. They're not in the Matrix. They're not writing code. They're not. They haven't injected any information into themselves. They're just fighting like two human beings would fight, like dogs.
I'll be like in here. Yeah. I'll let you put your hand on me.
Smooth or is it okay?
I just don't want to have to find something.
Right.
You know what I mean? If he's got to swing and I've got to find something.
You have to duck one. Basically, he's going to have to swing. You have to lift your arm, and everyone's going to have to be in the right spot.
And then can we use something that's not steel?
Yeah, of course. We have some pretty good props.
I can see you.
Feel good to wear that for a day?
I don't know.
And action. Now I got to punch here?
Just punch right in the chest. We never see his face. We won't see a connection.
Oh, okay.
No wires, no special powers that the Matrix might provide. It's dirty. Using anything available. Bits and pieces, sharp objects, and hot things, hard steel.
You looking forward to that?
I am looking forward to that.
That fist fight takes place in sparks, so it's strobe lights all over the place, and so it makes the fight really surprising. You see blurred glimpses of a fight, which makes it really jarring and horrible and very real in a way. It actually looks like a real fight. It really looks like they've hurt themselves, and they get bloody, and their fists are bloody, and it's like all the things you never see in a real fist fight.
Got
Everything else.
Should I grab that?
Yeah.
Screen graphics?
It's sort of somewhere between basic sec deck and a special effect. So there's times when it's literally just background stuff, no one pays any attention to it. It's literally just some blinking lights over the shoulders of the actors, but there's other times when the whole scene is based around what they're viewing on the screens.
His neural patterns don't read like someone who's in a coma.
We're known as the wallpaper department. Colour and movement, that's all it's about.
This is the screen graphics department. We're preparing for a scene in the rerouting facility computer room where the Vigilant crew come in and try and hack the main system. And so, we not only have to set up the environment that they're in, but, on their screens, the interface and what actually happens on their machines as they're trying to hack this mainframe system. So, there's a fair bit of research that goes into all of this. We visited a power station and got some reference images. Just the kind of stuff you'd expect to see in one of these places, close-ups of the various screens. And it's always great to have, design based on a sense of realism. We'll be producing graphics for the Nebuchadnezzar, the Majolna and the Vigilant, and of course the Logos. Graphics will be one thing that's used to help differentiate and give a sense that, oh yes, we are in a different ship now. It does help in that space to have a different sense of colour and shapes.
On the Ned main deck, there's 52 screens, 17 on links, and then each chair around has another 5 screens on each one.
It's supposed to be purely utilitarian stuff that just needs to be there to make the ship operate, to monitor the crew members when they get broadcast into the Matrix. And so it's a balance between making them look interesting and engaging and yet be very sort of functional.
We're in the operations room of the screen graphics. What you've got basically is 27 VCRs, 10 DVDs and 8 computers, a big matrix switch as well, and about 140 cables. We have spy cameras up there above each chair, and also for us to see what's going on. We have patches in from the film camera so we can see what's going on. And we sit down here with all our consoles and make them all work and allow for the actor to be interactive with them.
Keep moving, 65th floor.
A lot of the screens are all touch panels, so they can actually physically make the graphics work from where they are. So if they have a fit of spontaneity and they need to touch all the screens, they'll actually react.
They were a real great tool to have because they give you something to do as I'm doing things, or a sequence of things that go on, and so it gives you real action. You're not just faking it.
We spent a fair bit of time trying to get a system going in the cockpits where we hooked a joystick up to the main control that then got copied out to like 6 to 8 computers.
The advantage of that was that the actors didn't have to try to follow the graphics. The graphics would follow them. Because if you've got a flying indicator that's going like that and they're going the other way, or it's sort of all not matched up. So the idea was to take it so the actors wouldn't have to kind of focus in on the graphics too much. They'd just follow their own movements. On the Majolna, there's a series of gun bays when they're under attack from the Sentinels. This one of one of the gunners. We have to think, well, what would a gunner need to combat these machines? So this is a mock-up that we produced very early in the piece, where we thought that each one of these screens might be an individual gun. Since then, we've had discussions with the directors and they're saying this might be the centre screen, but we want to see some other things around it. So we go and subdivide that, those screens to provide information about, temperature, ammunition, some sort of radar system, a map of the tunnel system. So we have to come up with each one of these and animate it, and that can be really difficult.
Commander Lack, I got incoming.
How can that be? In the command centre, we know that these guys are going to be wanting or would be looking at particular information about the dock, what's happening in the dock, the siege with the Sentinels, and so we've created a bunch of radars that give them a real-time update of what's going on in the dock. Then there's information about the descent of the diggers. Basically, it's a matter of finding something appropriate for the set and for that moment in the film.
I didn't have to suspend my imagination so much because I really had everything right there, working for me. It's fantastic.
Screen graphics.
it was like an important part in the first film. It was like when Neo first comes aboard.
This is the main deck.
In the first film, it was the only ship we saw, and in this film, there's many more ships. Some big ships on this, some small ships. There's the Magellana, the Vigilant, the Osiris, the Caduceus, and the Logos.
Everybody wanted to draw ships, and some of them are pretty funny.
Do you have any of the, you have your little library of ships by any chance? Yep. Okay, we'll show you that.
It's a small class ship.
We're not using that one though, right? Because it's like, they thought it was a little too buggy.
I don't know.
Some of the guys you can't get out of that Star Wars mold, you know?
What do you mean by that?
They look like they're made by GM. They look like Datsuns with wings on them or something. But these things had to look like they're put together and built out of other ships and rebuilt and restructured. And
the whole concept that these machines might have been around for 1,000 years. And then you sort of have to look at it, well, if it's been for 1,000 years, when was it last serviced?
And each one had a different function, so they should look different.
These are all the concepts that have been turned into 3D models. The Osiris, known as the small class ship. It's called the Hunter ship, kind of a little bit more junked up.
The Logos has probably been the most recently serviced, but you don't know when. The amount of grubbiness on it is slightly pulled back a bit.
So it's like the sports car. It gets the Ferrari. This was an alternative design for the Magellana, which was dropped in favour of a Jeff Darrow drawing.
I got to do the Magellana, which is the one I really wanted to do because it's the hammer of God. It's the gunship, it's the Potemkin, it's the Bismarck. I looked at a lot of like Panzer tanks. It's sort of based on an Aztec hammer. If you look at it, it's almost an axe. And I put these scales on it, these big metal plates that they'd put on the sides of Panzers and stuff.
There's a landing pad for nearly every ship that Rob has modeled that's sort of shaped around the basic, silhouette that the ship is.
The actual docks themselves, I tried to make them look sort of like aircraft carriers.
Nebuchadnezzar, you are cleared through Gate 3 to Bay 7.
Roger that, Control.
Basically, when the ship gets close to surfaces, it repels an opposite magnetic charge, and we're going to augment that with a nice little blanket, a cushion of electrostatic energy.
Colin? Yes? Can you switch that on, please, mate? Colin?
The Neb is a four-man crew, which is why I think Link must be a super, super smart guy. Because in the first one, they had 7 other people there. They had all these other people to do all these jobs while some people were jacked in. Well, now, 3 of my crew, they're jacked in, and then it's me. So I'm monitoring the Matrix. I must be maintaining the ship, and like he must be all over the place.
What do we call these things?
LEDs.
If I was to be honest and frank, the ship main decks are my least favourite. They're difficult to shoot in. There's a lot of, people around monitors, a lot of people lying in chairs. Not to give the movie magic away, but it's the same ship, that Owen very ingeniously turns around to make it look something completely different each time. He's done a pretty amazing job too.
The Nebuchadnezzar, the Magellana, and the Vigilant were all the same floor base and with the same chair mechanisms, but with different cores.
This has been changed into another ship, right?
Yeah, this is turning into the Vigilant.
That's where we turn all the chairs around backwards.
A bit of redressing.
As far as I know, the upholstery goes red.
Used to be the Neb, now it's the Vigilant. When was it built? 2106.
The plaque off the Nebuchadnezzar had on it Mark III No. 2.
This is the core, where we broadcast our pirate signal and hack into the Matrix.
And my intention when I picked those numbers was to say this is like a Jaguar, which is like a Mark IV Jaguar. But people took this as a reference to the Psalms, Mark III No. 2. And if you actually read those passages now, they actually have a kind of a relevance to Nebuchadnezzar. Well, Nebuchadnezzar was our ship, and Nebuchadnezzar was a powerful king, and he used to, smite down cities. Well, the Nebuchadnezzar was a battleship. So there was a kind of a strange subtext within the subtext, in a sense.
This set as it stands is the Nebuchadnezzar. It looks pretty much identical to what it did in 1998, except it's been altered in a couple of places where it was damaged by the Sentinels. The interesting thing that happened with the Nebuchadnezzar at the end of the first film, it was in fact the only set that we were allowed to keep. And we packed it up, it was put into storage. And then Hugh Baderup, who's the senior art director, he was asked some months later, just before the film was released in America, to put it into shipping containers and ship it over to Los Angeles. And then they used the ship for doing publicity interviews. The design originally came from Jeff Darrow. He did a series of beautiful drawings of how all this should look and work. The idea of this ship is that it's like a hovercraft, and that in the centre of the ships, all of the ships that come from Zion, there's what we call a core. Essentially, that is a direct conduit into the matrix. If I was the operator, I'd be taking my needle out, I'd sterilise it, I'd move it all up out of the way if I can, and I'd take my needle in here. Now Tim here is my able assistant. I would insert it with force into there and lock it off. He's now locked in. So essentially the monitors, at the moment they've got generic graphics on them, but various points they can have exit and entry points. A lot of the time we could pull up on this screen the health status of the particular character who's in the chair. So there might be heartbeat rates, ECG readings. If we go over to Link's chair, you can do various bits and pieces by, some of these screens are interactive, so I can hit them and I can open up another camera, as you can just see that. Went from one bit to another, brought out this, I can hit it, and then normally what's going to load up is going to be just the chair. Wow, this is fabulous as well. You can indicate, so this kind of gives you a general idea of where there are people in the chair. So this is seat 7, this would be Morpheus's chair, the captain of the ship, and this indicates at the moment, because it's green, that he is in the matrix. Above it, we have other screens, and Link, or AK, can pull various bits of information up. So Link has at his disposal all this huge database, so he can pull up these various screens, and this one is indicating, I think, something in the mountains, which is from another scene with Neo. And then, so for specific scenes, there are specific graphics being generated by Tim and his team.
Howdy, it's John Gator. This is Anatomy of a Shot for Mifune's Last Stand, the big end for Mr. Mifune. This shot is the beginning of a scene. We wanted to tell a story right away about how Mifune was basically alone, deeply, deeply in the shit, because he's now surrounded by many, many swarms, and he's trying to hold them back with, you know, pretty much every ounce of skill that he possesses. So what you're looking at here is Steve Skroce doing everything he can to demonstrate the immense epic-like nature of this battle. You have a lot to look at. You have swirling swarms, you have individual sentinels battling at the feet of the APU robot. You have the full dock environment, including destroyed zones that are in flame. And you have the main actor, Mr. Mifune himself, doing his thing. We begin the shot with a patented Wachowski boom-up, which they like to do a lot in that movie Bound. So they still like doing these kinds of reveals, you know, for horizontal plane to sort of show the action. And we finessed that a fair amount, actually, you know, how fast that was going to come up, what distance away, what amount of visibility. Would we start from darkness? So in early stages, you can see, you know, the architecture clearly, but we darkened it down a fair amount. The actual walkway that he's standing on is all CG, although it is derivative of the real sets. It's all based with components from the real set. And the entire dock itself is, it's a CG construction, but aspects of it were stripped off of live-action sets, and some of the miniatures, like the doors in the background, were photographed miniature doors that were mapped onto 3D shapes. So we got all the benefit of the detailing that, you know, painters and sculptors can bring to this process, and we embedded it into our CG version. And the first thing you see is that the Sentinels are right on them. Okay, so you got like prime time on the left. You just saw there was one on the right that just passed by that was sort of ricocheting off. There's guys popping out in the air all over the place. So he's, you know, executing the Sentinel underfoot with one arm while adeptly killing others, pulling them out of the air with the other arm. In our pyrotechnics shoot, we would capture perspective libraries of shredding full-scale Sentinel heads with debris flying off and flame pouring out, and there was a whole recipe for what happens when a Sentinel explodes. This is just a preliminary test evaluating the torque of the pan axis of the motion base to see whether it could spin the carriage fast enough. The basic idea here is that the carriage, meaning the seat that the man is in, since it is surrounded by green, it's going to be stripped off and composited over the top of the animated APU. The frame that you see at the back of the carriage with the red markers is actually being used for tracking. There are little pulsing strobe lights that will help us find the position in space of the carriage. We stripped off the carriage part of the APU that allowed us to put that on a motion base that could spin and rotate its perspective by way of a motion file, and put it in front of a motion control camera that also was being driven by a motion file. These are machines moving quickly, you know, in real time, and there's definite slop. It's a hydraulics-based system. This is like an analysis of the orientation of the camera to the carriage with the position of the APU's body. Of course, that's not the final arm animation. A lot of times what we needed to have absolutely correct was the torso and you know, the sort of relative heights and distances to the camera. The nature of this scene sort of relied upon a great interaction between a real human and the robots. But this isn't superhumans. These are real people here that are attempting to manage and operate these robots. So we figured, okay, we'll photograph all the acting that goes on inside them. It was a common design that was going on between the computer graphics group and the production design groups. It's one of the cooler interactions that we had with the art department was in the construction of this APU. As the shot continues to boom, we get somewhat of a reveal of the dock, which is obviously overrun now with swarms, and the dramatic rotation of the beastie revealing our hero Mufuni. It's a classic hero introduction.
Action on the main base.
It's basically like a tank. It should look pretty formidable, and it should be kind of clunky.
This is a physical version. We had to build this so that all the human reaction could take place. We've got to pull Mufuni out of it, and the kid's got to jump into it. And it's not articulated. It's not a robot in the sense that it moves, but it can be repositioned. It can be posed for various shots. And it's taken a lot of people to build it.
We started the gun in April or May. We didn't start the APU proper until the beginning of June, and then we're hoping to have it close to being finished, middle of December. These are pieces of the feet.
They're part of the arms. It's filled with a foam in here. Plastic casts inside, they've got metal inserts.
These are the ammo casings for the bullets for the APU.
A mock-up carriage for the APU.
So it's being done in little bits and pieces and put together and made look 100 years old.
The guns are so evil, if you want, that I think I try to make them comic. If you want to make something fantastic, you add on things that people are familiar with so that they can relate to it.
It appears that art department has designed something based on an old M60 machine gun in the U.S. I mean, it's pretty impressive. The idea behind it is pretty cool.
Okay, this is full speed.
Along with building this APU, we've also built a carriage, a human carriage, which goes on a motion base, which is run by the visual effects department. And that motion base is run from the programming that the visual effects department have done. So they can put in the animated moves into the motion base, and then eventually they can take that human carriage and insert that, if you like, onto a visual effect one or a virtual one where the guns are firing and the object is moving in a very dramatic way.
They're driven by humans, as humans sit in the chest cavities. So you also have to consider the characteristic of the person driving it. So you can differentiate their movements also based on that.
What we had to do is devise a method to actually lock up, the positions of those people and have the mass of the machine that's driving them actually felt and seen in their body language.
And this motion base here is going to help us do that. Motion base combined with the motion control camera.
Both are being driven by files that have been based upon animations that we've been working on for months.
We've done an animation of the APU walking, and we've extracted some motion data out of the hips of the APU and have fed that data into this motion base and this motion control camera to repeat that same move. So basically the CG artist will be able to do all the animation for what the CG APU is going to look like, and then we'll be able to put a real person sitting on the front of a CG APU and have everything lined up seamlessly.
Totally different way of doing things. You actually had to work to an animation rather than the animation follow you after you've done the actual scene. So it was hard work, physically, and really hard work, actually.
Okay, as you can see here, that the seat, which is just the seat portion of the APU device, is actually mounted here to a Moog motion base.
Moog base is a 6-axis device that's usually used for flight simulation and motion rides, and it moves in 6 directions of force, so it can reproduce the moves you saw in the CG animation.
Here in the back, we have these shakers. They move at 12 cycles a second. That's to simulate bullets coming out of these Gigundo guns, and you see that translating into his body. I believe in you. You look up here, this is an array of strobe lights that are all file-driven based on where he's firing at the time. So they are firing off on a cue in relationship to where the position of this seat here. So this area here is dedicated to compositing on the fly, on stage, the results. So this is the whole net effect here of what you need, I guess, to make some. Of course, there must be a simpler way, probably over there, where you take the damn thing and you just shake it around like that. But it doesn't look half as cool, so we go to the lengths that we can. If you like really big physical things, blowing up, and if you like that stuff, yeah, it's very exciting.
There are no little shots. There's no like, hey, we're going to do the simple scene now. We're going to do there isn't any such thing.
It's so large in my imagination, I can't see. I have got no idea about how it's going to feel.
Yeah.
It's a very involved and very labor-intensive sequence with so many people and so many hundreds of crafts all working together.
We had this really strong sense this was one of the most complex sequences that anybody had ever attempted. I mean, it was going to involve everything, live action and miniatures and motion base, large sets, lots of CG, really complex scenes. And we had to make all of that fit together so that it would
You never felt like you were seeing all these different kinds of technologies.
This is for a CG character in the battle in Zion. And, will be replaced with I guess, computer-generated images of us.
It's a rig they used on another film.
We're calling it the PMS rib, but it means please make it stop.
I thought, oh, this could be very handy as a sentinel arm.
We're actually going to be able to pick people up and just whip them around like they're on the end of a tentacle and flip them off.
We did it what they referred to as mocap, motion capture, where the guys had sensors on them and they went through the stunt action and it was all captured on computer.
Beyond 30 feet or so, we think that we can trick the eye pretty easily. And so all of that cyberware stuff and UCAP and all that was really to make all these peripheral characters and secondary action around the battle.
We have points on the person's body. And we have all these 28 cameras. Each one looks at the points and it figures out where it is in space. So we take each of these points, and if you have 2 points on your hand and you're moving like this, we see these points like this. If you want to be able to take a computer image and make it look exactly like a person, how it moves, you have to do this motion capture process. You just have to.
A little bit more off to the side earlier, like so he gets picked up and he gets taken over here and shucking around? Yeah, like he just went woof.
Right, listen up. It changes that. It'll flick up and we'll go a diagonal.
The thing I love about motion capture is that this system is the closest thing to net docking chairs that we have. Actors come down here, we put sensors on them, and we put them directly in the computer.
Stand by, quiet,
a little
please.
closer to the real Matrix.
And John.
Rolling on take 4.
Ready.
Speed.
And
That was the best one so far. Great, Glenn. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Good.
3, 2, 1.
The way we could change that around a little bit too would be to run something behind the bunker.
Oh, yeah. Do you want a walkway like that then?
We're going to keep to the horizontal and vertical sort of orientation like that.
Yeah, a couple like that.
We chose to go with miniatures because we had a lot of destruction to do.
You can't beat it for getting tactile interaction when things are blowing up or being destroyed or smashed. You get a lot of stuff for free right in front of camera.
Most of the things that are being built primarily involve special effects, physical effects.
There's one element in here that's not quite right. It's a giveaway, then you're not going to believe it. You certainly see older films where they tried certain visual effects and it's a dead giveaway. And it usually always has to do with water, smoke, or fire.
It should look seamless. I mean, you shouldn't really be able to tell the difference between live action visual effects and miniatures.
I wanted to draw stuff so you could see how it worked, and so that if they built it, it wasn't just impressions of things.
All right, there, do that.
Okay.
Any questions?
Nope. We'll get art from the art department, and also art department will generate a mock-up model, a 3D miniature of what we're going to be building. From that, they then generate blueprints like these here that they use in live action, and they also generate the animatic models. And then the animatic models can be handed back to us, and we'll do model unit blueprints from those. And then we'll also do laser cuts and CNC files from those. Adam and I will take our AutoCAD files from the computer room in there, and we'll run them through a program that'll translate all the CAD data into an actual tool path that tells the head where to go. Throw in a new sheet.
And then we're also going to be storing it and
pre-breaking it strategically so that in the scene in which this is in, it's a crash sequence of the Mjolnir, it'll break realistically.
All these amazing people working and real artists working and real craftsmen working. We have the most talented crew. It's just phenomenal. You know, and it's not all computer. Nothing against computers, though.
So this is the final result of all the work that the whole team does. You know, things like this grill, all the very intricate little planier details are all laser cut. A lot of these walls here, and then the model makers come in and all the little greebly details and the texture and rivets and stuff, they've added all those and kind of made the whole thing work.
This model's about 4 months of work, averaging about 12 people a day.
Like the first team that worked on this one were the welders.
Solid carpentry, framing it up.
They'll build all the core structures out of wood and steel.
There's a lot of cast pieces on here that went through the mold room.
Then, of course, we have the paint crews that will do a lot of the texturing and painting, and then we also have the electricians that'll do all the miniature lighting.
Things are changing up to the last minute in this crane topple shot. Some angles are changing, some dynamics and how it's going to fall is changing. So the tests we did 7 months ago with the big wooden mock-up of this crane don't really apply much anymore. So with 1 day left to go before we shoot it, we're trying to guess what's going to happen differently if we turn this at a different angle and where it's going to land. Even though this doesn't tell us much, it tells me a little bit about how it's going to land and where it's going to fall.
Everything we make, we blow up.
Let's roll cameras. And lightning. Ready. And action.
At the same time, we were going to make a miniature of a particular object that was going to explode, like the gate of the dock. If we were going to make that anyway, then we were going to try to get that to be as good looking as possible and then photograph it to use as textures for computer graphics. So there are a lot of CG objects that are going to be in the dock environment that were based off of photographic textures of the same miniatures. So it's kind of a hybrid approach.
Go! Now!
It's really an epic sequence. I mean, it is just huge. And it's unusual because it uses everything that a filmmaker has at his disposal to create something gigantic.
And action.
It is full of live action photography, integrated with CGI photography, integrated with miniature work.
Halfway up, all papers.
Just below. Through tremendous breakthroughs in visual effects, breakthroughs in composite photography, breakthroughs in every kind of available electronic and mechanical medium. I mean, it's something that could not have been done ever until right now. It's just Hollywood at its most insane.
John, the way you treat your staff.
Get back to that computer.
The first film I saw about 7 times in the theaters. So when it came up, I just like I'm there, I'll do whatever. Just let me in. I want to be down.
When I got the call that I'd gotten the role, it was just like, I couldn't believe it. I started crying and laughing and called my mom, and she was crying. She dropped a cantaloupe in the middle of the market, I think.
I kind of knew what was going on, actually, because I think I was cast quite late. All my shooting was quite late. I'd heard about it as a thing that was going on in Sydney before I knew anything about the characters that were up for grabs.
The possibilities that I would be in it began to firm up, and I was excited about it.
I'm blown away by it, really. When they asked me to be part of the next 2, it was a great surprise.
One place I do have to suspend my imagination is what's happening on the screens as I'm reading the Matrix code. And that was a little tough at first because I couldn't understand what Larry and Andy were talking about. And after a while, I feel like I developed at least a language for me that a way I could talk to them and they could talk to me and I could understand more. Beyond like, beyond that, and we come up with sentences that sort of sum up the kind of feeling that I understood and Larry and Andy understood. There was a lot of scenes too. It was like 22 scenes, so first, 20. They were a little tough. We got a serious situation here, sir. Performing his duties on the Neb, he is a soldier. He is there, he knows where his position is, what he's supposed to do, what his job is, and that's what it's about. When he gets to go home is when he gets to be in love. And he gets to be in love with his wife and with his sister-in-law and the kids, and he gets to let it all hang out. The one thing that Link does do, which I think is really interesting, and that his name is Link, is he sort of is an interesting link between the audience and the movie. In the movie, a lot of things are happening and nobody seems to be paying attention, like Neo's flying through the air, and it's like just another day at the office, except for Link, who's like, oh my God! He gets to be the audience member in the movie. Yes! It was a real treat. I brought my daughter in, like, we both sat on the seat, and she was like, hey, Dad, is this where he punched? And it's like, yeah, and we just both sat there and loved every second of it.
I was excited, but at the same time, it was bittersweet. The first few scenes that I did, they brought Ellie up for continuity for a shot. At first, I remember thinking, okay, I don't know how to deal with this because I'm seeing her image and I'm seeing what she had done. So it was hard. Then I started, getting really affected and upset about the fact that she isn't able to stand where I'm standing and say these lines and do this role. And it made me cry on set. During a couple of scenes. And so then I realized later that it was her helping me. For some reason or other, I wasn't feeling emotional that day. I wasn't feeling connected with the scene. So I choose to think that she connected me.
In comes Nona, and she brings with her just this enormous presence, this like loving, like giving, and also like big forceful presence, because she's like a warrior in this thing, and she's no joke. And the scenes that we share are all really touching and loving.
I think that she loves Link, and Link is about all she's got left.
They're evacuating our level. We have to go. We're not going with you.
I just love how crazy that siege scene is. It's just so much action going on all at one time, and we're doing it with the green screen and with imagining stuff coming down, and it reads off the page. You can see it as you're reading it.
Action. Yes!
It's crazy. I knew it was an action film, but I didn't really expect that there would be quite so much action.
It was real.
It looks amazing, that thing coming down, doesn't it?
My thing was real. I was like, ah!
Yeah. Oh, mine, so was mine. Yeah, I had to get myself some muscles. That's been an experience too. I'd never been to a gym before, and for the last 4 months I've been there every day, so a bit of a challenge. There's one particular scene last Friday week which I found was a real struggle physically, and I was in pain. Like literally bruises everywhere and chafes.
All right?
Yeah. I'm going to have to do that too many more times. Sort of impressed with my head wound. But the scenes have been just mainly combat. I have a massive bazooka that's very heavy, and Z's shoving artillery into the back of it.
So, like Nona can be up there on the platform and you can, stick it down in the hole and pretend as if she's feeding it to you, you know what I mean?
And that's what we do together. We're just coming in and out of hatches, shooting baddies and disappearing. She has a really unfortunate interaction with a sentinel, and she cops it sweet.
Melodrama.
That was good.
Just give me one clean shot.
The brothers are from Chicago, as well as being huge Bull fans. I share that with them. I'm from Chicago, and I'm a big sports fan. And I'm a former seminarian. I studied to be a priest for about 5 years. And they were a lot like guys I went to school with. There was a description that came out on the breakdowns that said, looking for somebody who could physically go toe-to-toe with Fishburne. And we both are in love with Niobe. played by Jada Pinkett. She's gutsy, she is beautiful, she's tough. She's the gal that you want in that situation. And it's very easy to see why we would love her, and I think that would cause some problems between two strong-minded, forceful men.
I'm going to recommend to the council that you be removed from duty.
Perhaps to his detriment. He can only think rationally. He really wants to believe in all of the other stuff, but he cannot. I'm going to be among the surprised viewers, because when you're doing it, you look and there's a big blue-green screen or whatever with tennis balls. That your imagination is doing one thing. Locke is an interesting character. He's doesn't get the girl in the end. He probably gets left with the he has his gun, and that's about it. You wonder what's going to happen with this guy next. She goes back off with Morpheus, it seems, and what's he going to do? And I think that he has to reassess how he looks at the world. I think once he does that, he might get a girl. You might find some perfectly nice Zionian or whatever they're called. So, in The Matrix 4, Locke's Revenge, I think that it's going to be a really interesting path that he takes.
Mifune is a man of few words, but has a fierce loyalty to Zion, and he expects that from everybody. Every time I go to work with the boys on 3rd Unit, they keep describing him as the John Wayne of the APU, the Clint Eastwood of the APU. He could do anything with it. He makes it look like it's an extension of him. That's why I liken him to a samurai with that sword thing. It's just like a hand that he does. I went and had a look at the animation before we started shooting the big siege scene. It was extraordinary just looking at that, and that was just a rough idea of what was going to happen. It was amazing because I was watching it with Keanu and Larry and Andy. And Larry and Andy were making all the sound effects that go with it. And in terms of filming, just the technical side of it, because everything has to be so precise, I actually had to adjust what I was doing to fit the animation. And so in terms of technical skill, I was learning all the time a totally different way of doing things.
The machine has to come with me. Yeah. I'm already moving into the next move.
That's right. I have 4 penetration wounds here, and my face is torn as well. We're talking a lot of blood and a lot of not good-looking kind of stuff in there. What sort of made it funny was every time I looked at the brothers and they came out and they'd say, yeah, more blood, more. You're sort of down here. By the end, that was like a river of blood. It was it was getting in my mouth. And it opened my eyes to big filmmaking, big blockbuster kind of filmmaking, which we don't often get in New Zealand, definitely not in Samoa, where I'm from.
I get to be the person who won the lottery ticket and got to sit in the movie and be a person in the movie.
I've actually quite enjoyed this experience. It's taught me a lot.
The thing I'm looking forward to the most is being able to see it all back and see how it's all put together.
It's going to be fun to watch that on screen because we worked really hard.
Hey, it's John Jada again. This is the anatomy of the super punch as seen in Revolutions. The super punch was one of the first pieces of concept art that Jeff Darrow drew for Larry and Andy. I believe that was one of the very first boards ever revealed to Joel and to Warner Brothers as the future on the horizon. And the funny thing about it is that it was a punch. It's a guy getting punched in the face. Steve Skrosh drew it, and within his drawings came a lot of understanding of the graphic nature of the rainstorms and the use of water as an explosive element. This particular motion capture is pretty awesome reference material just to see how the body contorts in a roundhouse. Almost all virtual shots were planned in advance through visualization so that we could figure out what could be photographed as a reference or an actual component ahead of time. So this is just basically a 3D planning guide. Even from the very first bullet time shot we did in Matrix, we'd try to photographically shoot the same shot as best we could, but almost in every single case, it wasn't temporally correct. In the early days of trying to figure out how we would shoot photographic elements for this, things that I checked out included some documentary footage of Fight Club, one of my favorite companies in the business, Bouffe, located in Paris, had approached the final shot where Ed Norton shoots himself in the face. And they had used some high-powered air jets they shot into his mouth. We tried that, and it worked very well in terms of a reference of how flexible Hugo's face was. Additionally, I looked at Norwegian bare-fisted fighting. It was very severe. It was a great reference of guys getting punched directly in the head for real, and we really needed to know what that was like. We decided to make a sculpture that demonstrated the three-dimensional outcome of the hit. So we took a facial cast from Hugo, and an artist deformed that sculpture to sort of capture the caricature-like nature of the drawing. We put it into the universal capture system, so it was actually cross-referenceable with Hugo's real head that would do the performance after that. And one of my favorite things about effects is this sort of stuff. It's like experimentation. You try to manage experimentation as controlled chaos. In visual effects, you're going to find a lot of really funny preliminary studies. Usually, it's kind of a healthy exercise to exaggerate the idea of the effect and whittle it back to what you want. This is a rudimentary analysis of ripples. What you're looking at here is a study of rain. Like everything else, the rain had a list of specifications from some of the stuff you may have seen with the documentary of the actual photographic part of this fight. The chubby rain needed to effectively be, cascading lines so that when you looked at certain angles, you'd have this sort of graphic moire-like effect. When we worked out the interaction with the fist, we basically wanted it to be like a train smashing into giant glass rods. In examining documentary footage of guys being hit for real in the face, there is this thing that occurs right off, which is like an inch or so displacement of the skull in the direction of the punch, and that has a lot to do with the impact and the pain. So we had to figure out how much to displace his head and whether that displacement was going to also have some kind of overlapping effect with the ripples from the impact. So here's the final shot in all its glory. The characters are both virtual. The background is entirely virtual. The rain is all computer generated. The heads of Hugo and Keanu are based on the UCAP, but Hugo's head was augmented and mutated for the impact. I'd have to say we're really satisfied with it. We like the end better than the beginning, but the beginning is just a little pathway into your payoff.
I'm out of my mind. I'm out of my tree.
From an acting point of view, it was the most difficult part of the film for both of us, I think. We were fighting in the mud as well, so it was mud and rain. But by that stage, the fight had become more like flailing around, So. And the rain was so heavy that it was hard to speak without starting to have bubbles and streams of water running out of your mouth. Keanu was lying on the ground with the rain hitting his eyes. You couldn't hear yourself speak, so finding the right tone in there was really difficult because I had no notion of what I sounded like, and that was bizarre and basically blew a whole day shooting because of that. I had a dreadful day in the crater. I've never had a day like that on a film set before.
That was bad. That was just, The ladies took very good care of me, wardrobe and hair and makeup. They gave me the thermal stuff and they poured warm water around me. The worst part of it was the rain because of the position of my head. They made an adjustment in my head and then I just closed my eyes and I just relaxed and let the water come.
About a year ago, we wandered around Sydney looking for streets that we felt could suit the Matrix. But as we were walking around, we were looking for somewhere where we could build the crater, an interesting intersection. And as it turned out, it was the same intersection that we saw at the end of the first movie. And we decided we'll use that as the background for the end of this scene.
Thinking about the wrestling pose that Smith can be standing in while you're down on the ground.
The crater that we've built is quite dramatic in that we've tried to make it look like a bomb blast.
Basically what we've done is taken a whole series of rock molds off actual rock, put them together, stitch them up, and then blow urethane foam into them, which then gets pulled out and applied to the wall. It all has to be soft so that the principal cast don't do themselves a nasty injury. And as you can see around the top edge, there's a lot of kind of building rubble, which has come as they tear the buildings apart as they come down.
The challenge was getting a hell of a lot of water in and getting a hell of a lot of water out. We've got 6 rain heads up above and a lot of water getting dumped down the walls of the crater as well. Probably about 6,000 litres a minute or so on this set.
Join in the fun, the mud fun.
That's the right one.
Do you want me to mud up my own crotch,
I
darling?
would love to. Look, I even give you the crotch.
How sensitive I am.
It's just a clay-based product that we've mixed ourselves. We sort of picked a colour in conjunction with the art department, something that's safe and clean to use.
We're going to have a bit of a fight in it and have rain going. Do you have to study mud? Fine. It was learn on the job.
I'm an electrician, actually.
Makes beautiful patterns. I'd like to put some paper in.
You wait till the rain goes on.
Is it better then?
You wait. You just wait.
Oh, down the spine.
For 5 solid months.
Let me in. Let me go. Come on. I'll get it this time. I'm ready. Come on. Come on, James. Send me in.
Right now we are shooting scenes related to the highest altitude. That's about 2,500 feet above the Matrix City.
After it became apparent that it was completely impractical to try and shoot zero-G inside a plane with a film crew, we went into research and development as to how they could fight in mid-air, and it was decided that we'd basically end up putting the stunt performers and the cast performers at one point on a thing that we called the tuning fork rigs.
You know, we're just always in the harnesses, and after like 18 hours, it kind of hurts most of the time.
How hard is this thing to operate?
There's a lot of inertia in it. They're 30 foot away from me, so on whatever rotation he has in there, he builds up a lot of inertia, and trying to control that is actually quite hard.
The way to make it look like they were fighting in mid-air was to cover the back of where they were in blue screen so the cityscape could be mapped in. So we ended up building essentially a huge perspex egg that we called it.
It doesn't look like an egg, but originally was sort of designed like a, an ellipse or a half sphere surrounding the characters. It is now, for practicality purposes, half a box.
We had a few scenes like this in Bound, you guys. Jennifer Tilly up there in the rig.
This set is like 4 times the budget of Bound.
Hey, stand by.
Good. Slide, guys. Let's take everybody back to number 1.
Yeah.
Okay, all the cues play out, but we're going, this is like quarter speed, guys, quarter speed.
I'm feeling fairly paranoid today. It's a good thing we're not in America because I have a gun. And, you know, because there's no set here, it's just blue. I'm not sure about the blue shade that Mr. Pope picked.
Rather than light whole surfaces, sometimes you can just put a sheet of Mylar, a mirror that reflects the screen adjacent to it, and you get a precise match. So it's exactly the same color, brightness, and all that. It's very sort of economical way of expanding your blue screen and or doing like tricky spaces like that. I mean, like pretty good actually, a big room that's blued out with no lights actually on to make it happen.
This is the last sequence in the Matrix trilogy, and we've had 5 rehearsals.
We're standing in what we call the Matrix building, which is looks a bit like a barn, so we call it the Sky Barn. It was based around the building Eon, where our offices were in Venice. Originally, it didn't have the extensions, which you can see up there, which are the illuminated side walls. We've added those so that it was easy to do a fight, because it's a fight set, like so many of them. So it's geared around a lot of wire work. As you can see behind me, there's a lot of breakaways. So we've tried to create an interesting sort of environment for Larry and Andy to work in.
This is going to be a 3-person compilation. We have Darko Tucson, our other Neo double, doing the high fall between the 2 walls. We've got Keanu Reeves doing the last dragon slide. And I'm just going to do this little piece coming through the breakaway wall, hitting the ground, and starting Keanu's slide.
We're going to drop someone off this truss through this breakaway wall here, and it's going to look really good. This is actually the floor. It's set sideways, so it falls straight through, so you get the really hard effect of it just like hammering through the walls. It's all actually on its side, and the camera's all going to be on its side as well. So it's about 25 feet, I think, to the floor all up. Yeah, through the 2 walls and to the pads down there.
I'm going out to my spot now. I'm set to go under the truss. Okay, I'm set. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, action!
It's all right, eh?
I was gonna say, wait, behind the scenes here, sound technical.
So I worked this out on the computer last night, you know. I figured about 6 guys on the end of a rope with a piece of cable. And if we all match speeds, you may make it. The only notes from the brother, and you don't have to do this rehearsal, is the more sideways you can come through, the better.
Oh, come through? Okay.
3, 2, 1, go!
Happy to do another one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No problem.
That's just a warm-up, isn't it?
3, 2, 1, go!
Good wire team.
Chad.
What am I kicking with?
The totem pole. You know,
Oh, Jesus.
And go, Tiger.
A little slower.
That's impossible. What's the stunt here, Dave?
It is a hand pull ratchet back through the breakaway window.
3, 2,
There'll be token of line through the window that pulls me straight. The height was the major issue. You have really, really little control if you're on a wire. So forward or backward doesn't matter, it's the guys pulling.
What are the keys to your performance?
Don't push off too soon. React to the kick correctly. Keep the body position that the brothers want.
Camera is set.